Welcome to Touchdown Talks. I'm Spencer Taylor. These are going to be my predictions for the 2024 NFL season. Season just kicking off today. Can't believe I'm saying that. Super exciting. These are going to include predictions for every team's records, playoff seeding, the playoffs themselves, individual rewards, you name it. I've gone through every single game of the season to predict who I think will win each and every game. A lot of broadcasters and people might just give you predictions and general numbers, but I'm here to give you my exact numbers that I have checked with the schedule to make sure that everything actually adds up. And without further ado, let's begin by looking at the AFC. So this, as you can see, is my AFC playoff seeding predictions, going from the Chiefs, getting that first week bye in the playoffs, followed by the Bengals, Bills, Texans, Ravens, Browns, and the Dolphins. So that is my AFC playoff picture. And then going to go through the divisions here really quick. We have the AFC North. This is going to be a very competitive division. I think one of the better divisions. Pittsburgh finally has a losing season after such a long time of not having that. This is the year I predict they finally have a losing season. Still pretty close to 500, but this time I think they find themselves on the wrong side of that. But otherwise, outside of them, everybody else in their division makes the playoffs, has a pretty competitive year, a winning season. With the AFC East, I have the Bills, Dolphins making the playoffs again, and the Jets, sorry to say it, I know there's a lot of hopes for the Jets. I just personally am not bought into their hype enough. I've got them barely missing the playoffs, slightly below 500. In the AFC South here, I've got the Houston Texans making the playoffs. As you can see, I've got a pretty crazy projection for the AFC South. 3 teams all tying at 10-7, and yes, I did the math on the tiebreakers. The Texans, in the case of my predictions, would win the division. They would be the only team out of this division to even make the playoffs, even though all 3 tied for it, which is pretty insane, but nonetheless, they all tie for it. Texans get the nod and go to the playoffs. Titans, unfortunately, don't have a great year, playing for draft position, basically. Unfortunately, I don't believe they have the greatest roster. Not sure that they've got the right quarterback. Even if they do, even if Levis is the answer, I just don't believe they've got a very good roster overall. So they're going to take some time to rebuild. Then with the AFC West, of course, we got the Chiefs at the top. Unfortunately for AFC West fans, they're the only team, yet again, to make it to the playoffs out of this division. Of course, has been very much dominated by the Chiefs since Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and some of the others got there. And this is one of those years where nobody else makes it out of that division. Chargers get above 500, have Jim Harbaugh, a great coach, but I think this year, a bit of a rebuild for them. The Broncos get to 7-10, not the greatest season, but I think we all know they've been rebuilding, haven't really had a great go of it in a while, and I do think they have the right coach in Sean Payton, but when Sean Payton got there, and obviously also with Russell Wilson not working out, just tons that they need to rebuild and add on to that roster outside of quarterback. I think they honestly might have the right guy with Bo Nix, but again, quarterback isn't everything. It's a huge part of it, and I think with Sean Payton and Bo Nix, they establish a good foundation this season, and maybe next year is a much better year for the Broncos. The Raiders, I just don't think they have it right. I just don't really love much that they have on their roster. I worry that they may be having Devontae Adams upset and possibly even requesting a trade partway through the season. We'll have to see how that goes there, but I just not too confident in their chances with their roster, the coaching staff. I know it's a great story and everything. Everybody loves the coach and for what he did as interim coach in 2023, but I just don't think that they've got the right pieces there to have much success, especially in a division that's led by the Chiefs. Now going into the NFC, as you can see, this is my NFC playoff picture, with the Lions taking the top, getting that first round bye, followed by the Rams, Cowboys, Falcons. Those are your division winners for the NFC, and then the wild card would be the 49ers, Bears, and Packers. So starting right off with the NFC North for this conference, the NFC North, Lions win the division for the second year in a row. As I said, get that first round bye. They have another great season. And then my Chicago Bears, this may be a optimistic prediction from me. In all honesty, with the Bears, I could see them going anywhere from 10-7 to 8-9, and I wouldn't be surprised. Anywhere in that range, I wouldn't be surprised. They'll be a wild card team, is what I would guess. But I've got them 10-7 by these predictions, followed by the Packers at 9-8, and then the Vikings at 4-13. Vikings, I think it's going to be sort of a rough year. Certainly they won't be the worst team in the league, but I do think they've got some issues on the roster. Obviously, we know their quarterback situation isn't ideal with them losing J.J. McCarthy to a season-ending injury before the season even starts. only have Sam Darnold as your starting quarterback. You've got Justin Jefferson, but there's a lot of other positions that aren't the greatest on your roster. And so, you got to start a wide receiver. A lot of questions elsewhere. May even have a good coach, in my opinion. I do think they've got a good coach, but just have a lot of stuff they need to work on and build up in the future. So I don't think this is going to be a good one for them. Packers, I think they'll be really good. Really, Bears, Packers, Lions, I think all three have a chance to be playoff teams, be playoff contenders. I wouldn't be surprised if any of these three teams outperforms my expectations. And as I said, with the Bears, I could see them going as low as about 8-9. That wouldn't surprise me either. But looking optimistically, really with all three of these teams in the NFC, again outside of the Vikings, unfortunately, I think all the other three from this division have some pretty good potential this year. And even the Vikings, I do think they have a dark horse chance to surprise some people, certainly in some matchups, possibly even against the Bears. And honestly, when I was doing the predictions, there were some rounds of my predictions where I had the Bears ending up at 9-8 or 8-9, and a couple of those games that I was, ended up going a little bit more optimistic on in the end were those Vikings games. So Vikings could very much impact how the Bears do, or any of these teams do as well in the division. Now in the NFC East, I have the Cowboys winning the division at 11-6, followed by the Eagles 9-8. The Commanders 8-9. I think the Commanders have a chance to be surprising. I was very close to actually having them second in the division in the wild card. I think the Commanders have playoff potential, especially if Jaden Daniels ends up showing that he is a NFL-worthy quarterback, especially being that he does have running talent. It's very possible that even just early on in his career, he could be very flashy. And if they can do things right and build around that and have success off of that, they could very much make the playoffs this year, at least as a wild card team. The Eagles, I don't know. I think the Eagles could be better than this 9-8 record. I do think the Eagles are a playoff contender, or at least borderline, but it's just tough to say. The meltdown they had towards the end of 2023, I'm just not convinced that they've solved whatever those issues were. It's not really been totally clear what that was. There's been plenty of reporting and stories this offseason about the relationship between Jalen Hurts and their coach not being great. Just, again, all the questions of why things fell apart in 2023. They lost Jason Kelce at center. The Eagles, I think they can be in the playoffs. I think they can be contenders, but there's also a reality where I could see them struggling in spots either early on in the season or late in the season. And so that's why, for me, they end up at a prediction of about 9-8, and being borderline playoff team. Where I landed for these predictions, they just barely missed the wild card due to some tiebreakers. And then with the Giants, again, we know that the Giants, it's not been too hard to notice. They know they don't have the right quarterback. If you watch the Hard Knocks series for them this offseason, or if you even watched this week's episode from the Bears Hard Knocks series, we saw the Giants general manager speaking with Ryan Poles, the GM of the Bears, and mentioning, wow, it must be really nice for you guys not having to scout quarterbacks. And the Giants have a ton of questions elsewhere, so I don't think anybody's going to be surprised about them being there. And then at the top with the Cowboys, I do have them winning this division, being the third seed in the conference. I do have question marks about the Cowboys, but at least for the most part for this season, the question marks of CeeDee Lamb, that's been solved. Of course, they've got future concerns when it comes to Dak Prescott, to Micah Parsons. Those guys are going to have to get paid very soon, likely this upcoming offseason. But for this season, those shouldn't be too much of an issue. And obviously there's all sorts of lines and headlines from Jerry Jones and players on the Cowboys reacting to things that Jerry Jones says, but that's just kind of par for the course with the Cowboys. I don't want to read too much into that, but I think the Cowboys, unfortunately for Cowboys fans, probably have a very similar season to what they've had the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, again, the last 3 years straight, they've won 12 games. So, and as you can see, I've got them projected right below that again. Wouldn't be surprised if they even get 12 wins. Pile up a lot of wins against weaker teams, maybe win 1 or 2 against some playoff caliber teams, get into the playoffs, and in the first round or 2 have a unfortunately pretty humiliating exit, and we go into the offseason for them again with the same process there as well. It's always a cycle with the Cowboys. Now moving on to the NFC South, I have the Falcons being the one team out of this division. Similar to many of the past seasons, this is a division that struggles in the end. As you can see, I've got Panthers, Saints both having some of the worst records in the league. Slight improvement for the Panthers, I think, this year, but only slight. The Saints, I don't think they've got much there that I'm confident in. Doesn't seem like they're too confident or excited about Derek Carr, nor are Saints fans. I don't know that they've got the right coach there. There's a lot there about the Saints I don't really love. A lot of the good pieces they do have are older, so the Saints don't think they'll have a great year. The Buccaneers, I could see them outperforming the predictions I have here, but I think it's also possible they slightly regress. But at the same time, that was what everybody was predicting last year for them. Everybody was down on the Buccaneers, of course, last year, and they outperformed expectations, so it's very possible they do it again. And then with the Falcons adding Kirk Cousins, obviously they also drafted Michael Penix Jr. Who knows if we'll end up seeing him in action this year. Of course, if Kirk Cousins stays healthy, we shouldn't. And long-term for Falcons fans, you'd probably hope that you don't end up seeing Michael Penix this year, because if you don't, that means Kirk Cousins stayed healthy, played at least decently well enough to stay starter-worthy, and you gave Michael Penix one of the rare opportunities that quarterbacks rarely get these days in the NFL of getting a year to start behind a established franchise quarterback and getting to learn behind them. And that could end up paying long-term dividends with Penix once the Falcons do switch over to him as their starting quarterback in the future. But for this year, with Kirk Cousins, and even if they do have to use Michael Penix for some of the season, I think they've got enough stuff that they've changed and added to this team, new coaching staff, all that. I think they've got a chance to at least win this division and be competitors, and similar to the Buccaneers, get into the playoffs and be at least interesting for the first couple rounds. And then the final division to go over, final one for the NFC, we have the NFC West, and this year I have the LA Rams winning the division. San Francisco 49ers still having a great season. They'll be the top wildcard team, and quite likely, if my seeding predictions end up being correct, they would of course end up in the playoffs going to Atlanta to play, and that could be one of those where I could very easily see the number 5 seed going to the number 4 seed and winning on the road in that wild card week of the playoffs. And they would be, again, we've seen it a lot this last few years where the number 5 seed is actually often perceived, at least, and record-wise, a better team than the team that was in the 4th seed, just from winning their division. So I think the Rams, with winning this division, I think they've got a real chance to do it. I like a lot of the things they've got going, as long as they can have Matt Stafford stay healthy, and if Cooper Kupp can stay healthy and at least be somewhat like his old self. And even with that, they've got Kyron Williams, they've got Puka Nacua, they've got obviously Sean McVay, still one of the brightest, youngest coaches in the league. And then going down to the San Francisco 49ers, I still think they have a great year. I think this is kind of the last season in the window that they have been in the last few years. They've got a lot of players on that team that are going to be getting shipped out in the next year or two, including quite likely Deebo Samuel. I wouldn't be surprised if this is his last season with the team. And then they've got a lot of their other stars that are either getting older, are going to need paid, or are going to end up with other teams. Quite possibly after this season, they may even choose to pay Brock Purdy finally. Still, though, for 2024, I think the 49ers have a great season. Just one win behind the Rams, which with these projection totals at 13 wins and 12 wins, that's not bad at all. And they could certainly be a great contender in the playoffs. And maybe the 49ers and Rams even play in the playoffs, and I could even see the 49ers getting the win there. But at least for the regular season, I do have the Rams winning the division. Now, before I go into the playoffs, I have the NFL awards that I'm projecting. Most of these, if I'm honest, are pretty much the favorites in the betting world to win these awards, but all of them also line up with the predictions I made, with the Chiefs winning their division, winning the first seed in the AFC. Patrick Mahomes getting the MVP wouldn't be a surprise at all, of course. And then Offensive Player of the Year being Tyreek Hill. As long as the Dolphins make the playoffs, as I've predicted that they will, he should very likely be a candidate for that. Assuming he was healthy all season, or even most of the season, he'll definitely have racked up enough stats to be a top contender for that award. And then at Defensive Player of the Year, Dallas, if they win their division, get into the playoffs, as I said they will. Micah Parsons likely will have been able to contribute quite a bit and put up some good stats on defense. And then Rookie of the Year, as I said, I've got the Chicago Bears getting to 10-7, which would be one of the better records they've had in a while. And I have Caleb Williams with that offense, with all the weapons that they've added this offseason. I think he has a chance to maybe not necessarily break that 4,000-yard passing record that the Bears have never been able to achieve, that basically every other franchise has. I don't think Caleb Williams does that, but I don't think he needs to do that to be the Rookie of the Year this year. I mean, I think, honestly, one thing that even slightly helps Caleb Williams be a possible pick for this award is that a lot of these awards are narrative-based. A lot of the people that vote for these awards are journalists. There's certainly a narrative that the Bears and Caleb Williams could do what the Texans and C.J. Stroud did last year, and with C.J. Stroud getting that Rookie Player of the Year award in 2023, I think people would very much like the story of Caleb Williams and the Bears doing what C.J. Stroud and the Texans did last year, which therefore makes Caleb a very interesting story if he wins the Rookie of the Year award. And then the final award being Coach of the Year, that I would give to Raheem Morris. If the Falcons make the playoffs and say they look good on offense and defense, look confident on both sides of the ball, I think more than likely people will see that, and it's possible that if all my projections here were to come true, maybe instead Matt Eberflus with the Bears gets the award, but it's also possible that because Caleb Williams got Rookie of the Year award, that could either help or hurt Eberflus's chance of getting Coach of the Year award. And so then looking at the Falcons, as I said, if they're able to improve just as a basis on all phases of the ball, offense, defense, special teams, obviously a lot of that credit will get assigned to the head coach. And so that's why I've got Raheem Morris winning Coach of the Year. Now let's go into my playoff predictions and my playoff brackets for 2024. I first have the AFC side of the bracket for you. So we would have the Chiefs, of course, getting that first round bye. And for the wild card matchups, we'd have the Dolphins visiting the Bengals. I don't like the Bengals in cold weather, so giving the Bengals the win here. And then the Ravens going to visit the Texans. This one's a very interesting one. I don't know. That one, if that matchup happened this way in Houston in the playoffs, I could see that matchup going the other way and the Ravens winning it. But in this round of predicting, I've got the Texans winning it at home. They go on, play the Chiefs, lose at Arrowhead, while the Bengals and Bills play in Cincinnati, and the Bengals get the win at home there, followed by the Chiefs and Bengals playing at Arrowhead for the AFC Championship, and the Chiefs get the win, and they go to the Super Bowl and get their chance to try to get the three-peat. But now, before we talk about that and the Super Bowl, let's see who the Chiefs would be playing. So with the NFC side, I, of course, have the Lions first round bye. Rams host the Packers. Packers get defeated. Two young head coaches who have history together. I think McVay gets the upper side of things. Again, with the slightly more experienced team at home, they get the win there. The Cowboys versus the Bears, and I've got my Bears going into Dallas and humiliating Dallas somehow. Comes down to the wire, and Dallas looks like they're in control for parts of the game, and then in the last minutes of the game, maybe the Bears get a pick six or something like that, and then the Cowboys have a couple seconds left on the clock, and they aren't able to get down the field to get the field goal or touchdown that they need to get back on top, and the Bears would win that. And then I have the 49ers going to Atlanta, as I mentioned earlier, and then 49ers winning in Atlanta. Good work by Atlanta getting to the playoffs, but 49ers still more seasoned, experienced team with winning, and a much better roster still. They get the win. That means the divisional round ends up being NFC North rivals and NFC West rivals playing against each other. I think that's very interesting. I actually just realized I had that happening. I hadn't noticed that until just now, but the Lions, as much as it would hurt me to see this, they do get the win over the Bears, but I also wouldn't be surprised if this happens. If the Bears make it to the divisional round, period, and win a playoff game, that being in the wild card, I would be ecstatic just to see that, to be honest. So, and for Lions fans, they definitely deserve to go to the Super Bowl. So I would be, happy for Lions fans to be seeing them continue on. And then the Rams, 49ers, I think this year the Rams get the advantage over the 49ers. Then the NFC Championship game ends up being the Lions hosting the Rams. Rams go in, another great game between those two in Detroit. Lions fans very hyped. Lions get the win, and they get to their first Super Bowl. And unfortunately, they fall short. The Kansas City Chiefs do get their three-peat, has been getting talked about for months now. And with that, Patrick Mahomes wins the MVP. I've got the Chiefs winning it just barely. 27-26 would be the ending score of that game, as my predictions go right now, months in advance. And with that, thank you for watching. I know this isn't very pleasing to the eyes, that's why it's just here at the end, and we didn't look at this the whole video. But if you wanted to see what my predictions were for every individual game, here is the chart that you can look at where I went through every single game, went through this whole spreadsheet multiple times, changed things up here and there, Enjoy Ravens at the Chiefs tonight. Enjoy the rest of week 1, and I will see you in the next video.